Hello, Ultimate Racers. I'm here to make a quick tutorial on how to make tunnels and the lights for the tunnels themselves. I had at least one request for that, so that's what I will be doing. I will be using Trial Mountain to exemplify that. And to start off with some disclaimers, I am using GIMP, which is free. You can freely download it from the website. Uh, but you can probably do this with pretty much any other image editing software, even Paint.net. It will probably just be a little bit different, but the principles are quite simple, so you should be able to do it anyway. Also, I'm not like any kind of image editing expert, so some of my steps might not be as efficient as they could be, but I think they are fairly simple to follow, and it shouldn't be too hard. So to start off, this is my Trial Mountain map without the tunnels. So you can see here the tunnels. I basically just removed the tunnels. So let's recreate the tunnels, or at least one of the tunnels. Let's say this one. Okay. So first off, there's two steps to making the tunnel like I did, which again, it's only my way of doing it. You might have a different technique, and that's fine. So there is the shadowing, because the tunnel is dark, and there is the lights that I added inside it. Now, in regards to the lights, there's this thing called a sodium vapor lamp, which I will show you right here. So most lights in like cities are mostly this kind of sodium, low or high pressure sodium, which has a yellowish tint to it. You can see here it's mostly yellow, orange. You can see that orange tint on the lamp. And if you look at Gran Turismo, the lamps, they are indeed yellowish, and depending on the version, they might be more towards the orange. So that's why I chose that specific color to uh, to make the lights. So you can of course use any other kind of color. That's fine. So to start off, let's start with the shadowing, because that's simple and you don't really need any lighting. You could just have a simple tunnel without lights. So first off, I like to do uh, tunnel. So I have a layer group here, and let's have a shadow layer. So let's just grab black. Let's have, yeah, the pencil. The size doesn't really matter. But what we're gonna do is we're just going to paint over wherever you want the tunnel to. You don't need to be super precise at this point. Okay, so personally, what I do is I have the shadow in black, and then I put the opacity to 80%. You can type out 80. You want to be super precise, not super important. So as you can see already, we have a shadow here. You can just go with like some kind of tool like this. You can get rid of the parts outside the tunnel, the parts that you don't want the shadow to be on. That's fine, just like that. Boom, it's the tunnel. Now you might notice that some parts here are not doesn't make much sense. Okay, don't worry, the tunnel is supposed to like end here. So now there's a few ways to approach this. The start of the tunnel, it can be quite sharp, or it can be feathered, right? So if you look at the way that I personally did, it's feathered. You can see that it's kind of smooth, the way that that the tunnel ends. And it's fine if you don't want to do that. If you actually look at Gran Turismo, and uh, quite often the shadow will actually be sharper than that, because of course you're kind of entering a tunnel, so suddenly there's no light at that point. So if you want to do that, what you could do is just do something like, I don't know, this, and bam, there you go. You have a sharp a sharp difference between light and dark. Now you could even go here with the eraser tool, and you could like feather it a bit so that it's not completely sharp, you know. Now obviously there's like a line here that you'd have to actually have some work here to make it not noticeable. Boom, and it's still kind of sharp, right? There's a contrast between light and dark, but it's not as sharp as this one. There's a different way to do this, and this is one of those that I have no idea if it's going to work in or how it's going to work in different software. But what you can do is you can use the gradient tool. Okay, and I'm just going to do a new layer. You don't need to do a new layer, but just to exemplify what is going to happen here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, let's say, this area. Okay, and now I'm going to do, let's change to erase. This layer will be erasing from the other layer. And now we're going to have, yes, from black to transparent. And now we're just going to do a gradient. You see what's happening? So basically, you can have just a gradient that deletes the shadow. Now obviously there's some work to do here to make it softer, to make it more logical. Okay, something like this maybe. Because if you go too much that way, you will the line that separates will be sharper. Of course, you could just paint a bit more. Instead of having that sharp line, you can paint a bit more and then apply the gradient. So actually, let's do that instead of applying. So you can see that if we just apply this, you have this separation here. But let's do in erase. But let's just paint again. Let's just paint here a bit. Smaller. Boom. Okay. Now we have a buffer here, right? So you can just do exactly the same. And if you're wondering why I'm selecting this like this, is that I just want the gradient to apply here, so it doesn't go over that edge. So yeah, so as you can see, you can have it be much more, much softer, and not as jarring. You can bring it forward if you want, so that it's not as extreme. And boom, there you go, a more a softer difference there. Now let's go to the shadow. Let's just manually raise a bit here so that it was a bit noticeable, the sharp edges. Okay. And you can do exactly the same here. I'm going to do a simpler way. You can just literally erase this manually, like this. Yeah, there we go. And it's still kind of yeah. You can lower the force of the brush when you're erasing, so it doesn't erase as much. Usually you have to go really low for it to be soft. See? Now the difference is softer, but it's still there. And again, that's your choice. You can do it however you would like. Anyway, that's the tunnel. You can now guess you could merge them. Doesn't really matter. Now, by having the erase, of course, it literally just erased the lower. Let me just show what is happening here. So this is the gradient that we did. So everything that is not transparent is going to be erased from the lower layer, right? And that's basically it. It's kind of self-explanatory. If you realize, you just have the gradient deleting the shadow, and that's it. You can also change the opacity on your gradient for some reason if you feel like that will achieve some kind of effect that you're looking for. Not really what I'm looking for here, so I think this works. Now let's get to the lights. So I did two things with the lights. There is the lights themselves, like the points you can see here. And I also separated all of them by tunnels, so I can manually delete each tunnel. So there's the light itself, the light source, and the illumination of the light, right? It's rather crude, but again, you can play with this however you'd like. So first off, let's get a good orange. I think this was the orange that I used. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have, I actually don't remember what size brush I used, doesn't matter. Let's do something like this. Boom. This is gonna be the main source of the light. And I guess we could just do the other ones. Why not? Can it go for the other ones? I'm not doing this with much rigor, so you might want to be more careful when doing this. Now I'm going to create a new layer. It's empty now, be clear. Internal lights, illumination, let's call it like that. Internal lights like sources. So the illumination is going to be a bit different. We can have this to have it as a guide. So what I did with the illumination is that I painted roughly where I want the light to be. Something like this. Light is going to be here, here. Again, remember that the other one is a different layer, and it's going to illuminate here. Can expand a little bit. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we are gonna go to filters and blur and apply a Gaussian blur. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna blur out the light a lot, as you can see. there's an issue here. Let me see how much did I use. About 90, 50 opacity. So it really depends on how you're doing things. So let's do it with 50 opacity on the illumination. Let's go to Gaussian blur. And now when we blur, you can see as we increase the blur, it's going to be more spread out. There's still that small difference here. You can kind of see. Okay, but let's say that this is a bit too much. The blur is not working very well. I want to have some spacing between the lights to make it look like, you know, they're actually illuminating these areas. Let's make it more focused. Focused light cone here. Same here. This one seems kind of small, but no worries. I guess you can see the effect then. As we increase the blur, you can see that now, even though it's getting blurry and it's getting more faded. You can keep going, but after a certain point, it's probably not worth it. You can see now that it is illuminated, but mostly on those areas. And we can do the same for the source. The issue with the source, and what I would probably suggest to you, is to keep it with a lower blur. There we go. And with this lower blur, it kind of looks like the light is coming from there. You could also have a lighter tone of light. So instead of that orange, it could be more towards the yellowish, something like that, just to show that it's to give that illusion that it's the light source. Okay, I'm just going to invert selection and delete the parts outside the tunnel so that it doesn't bleed out into the rest of the map. And there we go. This is a very crude example. You can see here that the one I did is much more subtle. I think I probably used a different shade of light. And what you really need to do is you need to play with the opacity, with the blur, right? Because you could have opacity like this, which is kind of stupid, or you could have it like I was having it at 49, but you could have it more like here. So do try out a few options. You can always duplicate the layer before applying the blur and have like a copy of the pattern of the light so that you can try different blur patterns, blur values to see what actually works best for you. And we can also lower this. So yeah, and that's it. That's pretty much how I did it. In this case, I think I actually made it much more subtle than I did here. I probably blurred a bit more, but this is just an example of how to do this. I'm gonna give one last example. And this one is related to Windows. So let's take nice white here. So this is a technique that I did use on stuff like Birmingham Night. So let's take this go. And now let's create a new layer. And now we're gonna have a larger one. Okay, so first let's go to the small one. Let's apply on the small one. This is during the day, so this would work a lot better in with a night filter on, which I'm not going to explain now, but the principle is basically the same. So we have the Gaussian blur, and because this, remember, this is the main light, it's the main source, it should probably not be too bright or too blurry. You could have it maybe like this. Okay. And I don't know what a good value for the opacity would be. You'd have to find that out by yourself. Really depends on what you're trying to achieve. And now we have the other one that I put on top, but it should actually be low. And we're going to blur it more. And the reason for that is that it gives a certain a glow. It gives a glow to the window. Again, this would be more noticeable if we were dealing with a night track. Right. You'd have something like this. You can have the glow. Without the glow, it doesn't really it doesn't have the same effect. This is very good to have for these lights in particular. So you kind of just do the same thing for these lights here. Really small, like this, and then you blur it. It's as simple as that. And boom, there you go. And you can make it brighter or not. That's it. That can really make the lights pop out and seem like there really is light coming out of those windows. And again, don't forget that you can also always just adjust the opacity to make it more or less noticeable. Anyway, that's it. I hope you liked it, and cheers.